I was initially really excited for the new Supergirl movie that was coming out because it was the first time that a comic was getting a straight one-to-one live action adaptation. After now having seen the movie, some of the differences to the comic have irked me for like a while. There are also some differences that I'm perfectly okay with, some that I even like. Let's talk about it. Spoilers for both the movie and the comic, Woman of Tomorrow, that it was based off of if you haven't seen them already. One of the most disappointing parts of the movie is how it looked. Considering this is one of the most beautiful comic books I've ever read, from Bill Chiavelli's pencils to Mateus Lopez colors, the world constructed in this book is nothing short of a space fantasy. On the other hand, the Supergirl movie, the world tends to have a mesh of like a Guardians of the Galaxy feel as well as Star Wars, with some of the creativity regarding the look and feel of the movie put into like the aliens that we see throughout. And I do appreciate how much effort that was put in to make the aliens in the world feel lived in and established. However, the color grading is downright abysmal. We go from brown planet number 1 to brown planet number 2 to brown planet number 3 that sometimes has green lighting. Naming a planet after the artist of the book that this movie is based on, the planet Bilky, and then having that planet essentially be a brown low down Guardians as set piece that has none of the triumphance or even a semblance of the fantasy coded style or panache that the books had is darn right disrespectful, or just near disrespectful. It also kind of sums up a lot of the problems I have with the art direction in the movie. They take a thing from the comic and they make it brown and less cool, just like that Kryptonite planet. Another thing I have a problem with is the villain of the story, Krem. Now, I can kind of see why they changed Krem in the way that they did. In the original book, he wasn't really the most poignant or distinct type of villain. Even appearance-wise, he was nothing more than just like a regular dude with funny-looking ears and some archery gear. In the comic, he spent most of his time running away from Kara and Ruthie and finding clever ways to chicken himself out of a real fight, while in the movie, he's actually a threat, and a strong one. Granted, obviously not as strong as Supergirl, but you know what I mean. I think that making him such a cartoonishly evil looking villain with all the metal on his face and the super strength was a choice. I understand wanting to make him something that has more of like a threat and menace quality that would add to some of his villainy, but they also kind of erase some of the terrible things that he did in the comics along with it. So they kind of just made him an incredibly forgettable, generic evil guy that doesn't even like go above and beyond with his evilness. The comic version has Kara and Ruthie following Krem as he commits atrocities throughout the galaxy, such as partnering with the brigands to massacre the purples of Corone and plenty of others. The journey that our heroines go on in the book seemingly takes months, so that the carnage left in Krem's wake has time to simmer for our heroes to find. The movie, however, seems to take place over a couple of days due to the time crunch problem affecting Crypto's poisoning, which kind of makes sense from a practical standpoint, but in my opinion, it makes it way harder for me to feel Kara and Ruthie's relationship because it just seems like they hadn't spent enough time together. Overall, I feel like the fact that he's just kind of a normal dude in the comic makes his atrocities that much more impactful, and that regular people can inflict that level of violence on others, in contrast to the movie where he's kind of flattened down to look like a very disturbed individual who also has a weird amount of super strength and resilience, not through the cunning in his comic, but also sheer brute force. There were two more details that were kind of minor that bothered me while I was watching the movie. Since I watched this movie after having already read the comics several times, I was looking for those Easter eggs and references, which is why I was able to immediately tell that the second planet on their venture was named after the artist of the Woman of Tomorrow comic book. So while Kara and Ruthie had their little bonding conversation in the bar owner's house, with Kara explaining to Ruthie how she lost her people on Krypton, I thought it would probably be in that setting that they would have had one of the most notable scenes in the book, that being when Kara taught Ruthie how to wash her hands. However, that scene was omitted from the movie. And that's such a shame, because that scene could not only give the viewers like a detour time to rest throughout this action-packed journey, but it could also do more work to humanize the both of them, reveal a little more about their sensibilities and where and how they were raised, and further solidify their relationship to the viewers. Another little thing that bothered me was the change to Ruthie's family dynamic and how they all died in the fire. Now, in the comic, Ruthie was a girl with numerous male siblings, raised in a rock farming community with her family seemingly being in a sort of state of peasantry. Krem was a regent to the local king who made a joke towards Ruthie's father that was meant to expose traitors. When Ruthie's father didn't laugh at the joke and expressed that it was inappropriate, Krem unjustly and unceremoniously executed him and left the sword in his chest, same sword that Ruthie later would find, and it would be a source of conflict for her later. In the movie, Krem came to Ruthie's family looking for a sword because her father was a renowned swordsmaker, and in the process, Krem was a very rude guest and threatened them. Since Ruthie's seemingly only brother in the film had headphones on, he saw her in the hallway, tried to surprise her, only to be gutted by Krem immediately because he made a sudden move. And after this, Ruthie's parents attack Krem and also die because he's low-key not to be trifled with. And with that, Krem sets their house on fire, leaving Ruthie the only survivor. While I do understand the decision to kill her whole family instead of just her father, because it does help with the parallels of how Kara lost her whole world, but the reason I prefer the former over the latter is a clear class disparity, highlighting the wonder of Ruthie's travels. She had travel prior to the events of the books, but not to distant planets, and that is the same in the Supergirl movie. However, the difference in experience with the people of Maypole, for instance, to the folks back at her home planet was fundamentally more jarring than that of the movie. I also feel like her upbringing helps explain a lot about her thought processes in general and helps flesh her out a bit more as a character. There were some changes to the book that I actually preferred for the movie. One of those being the fact that Krypto actually was in some sort of danger, unlike in the book where Kara reveals towards the end that he was just fine all along. Early in the book and the movie, Krem shoots Krypto with a poisoned dart/arrow and leaves with Kara's spacecraft. The planet that Ruthie, Krem, and Supergirl were on orbits a red sun, so Krypto couldn't really tank the arrow like he normally would, and the poison tip would slowly kill him. In the book, Kara just told her that Krypto is being nursed to health by the doctors of Ruthie's world and that he'll be alright. In the movie, the saving of Krypto's life through obtaining the anti-venom necklace that Krem had was something that furthered the stakes and made the urgency more real and necessary. So I do enjoy that change more than the, oh yeah, he was okay the whole time. Another change that I enjoyed was the inclusion of Superman. It was obvious that he would be showing up in some sort of capacity, considering this is the DCU, a shared universe, with the two of them currently being the only ones to have movies. David Cornsweet continues to prove why he was the perfect casting for Superman, and every line felt perfectly indicative of something he would say even in the comics. Now, the only thing I kind of side-eyed was the old, I don't speak Kryptonian. Because why in the Sam Hill would he assume that Krypton's only language would be named after its planet? Or that bothers me in general though. So that's not even yeah. One last change that I was perfectly okay with and kind of liked, but it was I would have been fine if they didn't, was leaving Comet the Super Horse out of the story. It was kind of a no-brainer considering the Supergirl is way earlier in her career and probably didn't have the Silver Age hijink nonsense that the comic Supergirl would have had at this point. So Comet really just would not fit in this movie at all, and his presence demands explanation considering that he was not always just a horse. Now in the comic, Supergirl and Ruthie go on a journey to find Krem, and Ruthie's main goal is to kill Krem in revenge for her father's death. At the end, She tries and is unable to, whilst Kara's goal was to teach Ruthie that killing is bad. She was even about to swing on Krem for harming Comet, she being Supergirl, and Ruthie used what she learned from Kara to stop her. They decided to leave him in the Phantom Zone for hundreds of years instead and released him after they deemed him to be rehabilitated. In the Supergirl movie, however, after chasing and occasionally running from Krem through 3 planets, she decides to take Krem away from the others and kill him so that she could spare Ruthie of the pain of killing him herself, because she's too young, she's a child. Now, I don't really like this change because it feels very antithetical to the purpose of the book, which was like to teach Ruthie to let go, or that killing was bad. But it could have been an interesting juxtaposition had it been like an intentional change from the jump instead of a misinterpretation. Let me explain. The screenwriter of the film, Anna Nogueira, interpreted the ending where Krem was spared as an old man, as the panel suggests. An older Ruthie bops him in the head with a stick. However, the on-panel text, which was an in-universe book that changed the ending, telling her readers that they killed Krem at that point. Tom King himself said that in the ending, they actually did leave Krem alive, that the text on the screen, on the panel, was unreliable. He did not die in the comic book, but that misinterpretation was apparently what led him to dying in the movie. So if they actually changed it to, we just killed him off because we think that would have been better, and not she did kill him in the comics, I think that would have been a better change. It's not though. In conclusion, the Supergirl movie was a pretty fun watch, but there were things that annoyed me while I was watching them. I have a couple more little things that don't really need their own section, so I'm just like rapid fire. I'm kind of indifferent on Lobo's appearance because while Jason Momoa was really fun to watch, he low-key didn't need to be there. Krem looked absolutely ugly, and it's a shame that he did in the movie because the guy that they casted looked perfect. Actually, he could have portrayed the comic character perfectly, but they didn't do that. I also wish that they kept more of the otherworldly look to Ruthie and Krem, with like the elf ears and Ruthie's crown, or like pixie cut, made her look like she was from a different planet. Because in this one, Ruthie just kind of looks like a random little girl. Like she doesn't look like she's from space. But overall, alright movie. Would have been better if I didn't read the comic first. Can't wait for Spider-Man. I might make a video on that when it comes out. And thanks for watching. Bye.